Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Each week we talk about heart rate variability and how it can be used to improve your overall health and wellness. Please consider the information in this podcast for your informational use and not medical advice. Please see your medical provider to apply any of the strategies outlined in this episode. Heart Rate Variability Podcast is a production of Optimal LLC and Optimal HRV. Check us out at optimalhrv.com. Please enjoy the show. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I am here with a great guest today that I am excited to dive in to his latest book and his 4 steps, which I think is really going to resonate with our audience here. So I got Greg Damian, fellow Hoosier. I love that about your bio. So Huntington, I believe. I spent time in Muncie, and I was born in South Bend and West Lafayette. So, you know, as far as I know, you're out west here now, very short distances as far as what we deal with out here in the West. So always great to have another Hoosier. I don't know, it's a stereotype, but it's good to see that basketball, we seem to remember how to play that this year with Purdue and IU, having pretty good teams. So for one, I'm enjoying this, but I'm really excited to talk about your book, your work, the framework that I really enjoyed reading in your book. So, but I want to start out a little bit just with your story. I think how you came to be this, and I was joking with you a little bit ahead of time, is the cover of your book is beautiful, and you're on it with your shirt off, which my joke is that would not be a positive sales. I'm pretty proud of my fitness level, but
I think you're in pretty good shape, Matt.
I'm not at that level, so but it doesn't sound like you always had that physique, and you've really what I appreciate about your book have really not only looked at the physical side of health and wellness, but I really appreciate the mental health side, the relational side. In HRV, we talk about social, cognitive, mental, medical health, and your book really, I think, does capture all four of those aspects that we know improves heart rate variability. So I'm excited to share your story. So how did you become a person who in their 60s can throw your Speedo body on a cover of a book with pride, my friend? So tell your story a little bit to introduce yourself to our audience.
Matt, thank you for that kind introduction. And by way of introduction, yes, my name is Greg Damian, and I'm the author of the book Abs at 60, the 4 steps to look and feel younger at any age. I'm a motivational speaker. I like to think of myself as a health and fitness influencer, and I'm a coach. So my story is sort of the second chapter of the book. The first part of the book, I basically say, look, I put myself out there because I like to show people what a 60-year-old can do. But I don't, and it's not necessary to do what I do from a health and fitness perspective, which we can get into, to be healthy and happy. And you mentioned the mental side of this. My story goes back, and thanks for bringing up Indiana. I was born in Huntington, Indiana. My parents moved. My mother's from Fort Wayne, but they moved to Buffalo, New York, which is where my father's from.
It was too warm in northern Indiana for them, and they had to find someplace with worse weather than we had.
Right. My mother was 19 years old when she got married. I mean, those were the days, right? And she moved from Fort Wayne to Buffalo, and she must have been thinking, "Oh my gosh, how couldn't I have made a better choice than this?"
Yeah.
Well, they did sort of see the light, because when I was in 2nd grade, my family moved down to Huntsville, Alabama.
Yep.
And
which is a huge, another big move, like big move.
Yeah, that's a huge move. I mean, the math is 1969. So, the men had just landed on the moon. I was 8 years old, and my folks moved me from Buffalo, New York to Huntsville, Alabama. And I'm going, the people here talk different. they don't talk like my parents. They don't talk like my friends back home. It was a bit of a transition. And I don't think my parents ever, when I wrote about this, my mom read it. She's like, I never really thought about that, the impact on the kids when we did that. And, thanks for bringing that up. And I never felt, I didn't embrace the Southern culture. My brother and sister were both younger than me. So they pretty much grew up with it and have stayed there their entire lives. And so when I go back, yeah, they kind of turn down the Southern accent some. Right. But my motivation I was the 100, I mentioned I was the 118-pound kid in high school. So I wasn't, I was, and a lot of this was just my own beliefs, right? About self-worth and how do I fit in with all of these people. And I didn't get a whole lot of encouragement from my folks to go do something grand with my life. Fortunately for me, I was really good at math, and I went to even in when I was a senior in high school, I went to the local university and I took calculus. So yes, was I a nerd? Yep, I was a nerd. Right. Um, didn't necessarily make me very popular, but I had already started down that track with that school, Alabama and Huntsville. And so I just put my head down and said, I'm going to get through, my father was an engineer. I decided to study engineering, and that's what I did. And in 3.5 years, I got that degree, and I moved down to Florida. My father had a very curious sort of way of raising his kids, and he wasn't terribly involved. He more or less surrendered that to my mother. And what his main, I mean, I hate to kind of say it, he's passed now. And, I had a reconciliation with him, which was a beautiful story, but I was kind of resentful, but I also picked up some of the alcoholism from it.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I got down to Florida, and there's plenty of opportunities to drink in Florida. Everyone knows that.
Yep.
Right. I started doing my fair share of drinking, but I had a coworker who encouraged me to go run with him. And I don't know what made me do that, but I did. And I ran 3 miles with him. And he was like, first of all, most people don't take up the opportunity to go run with me. And then when they do, they don't usually go run 3 miles. And so that was kind of pretty cool. And I started running with him. And the alcohol started to really compete in a way with my fledgling athletics. Yeah. And it kind of came to a head one day that I was coming home from work after happy hour, having had some alcohol, and weaving in and out of traffic. There's this voice in my head that says, I don't know what you're doing here, dude. This may not be smart. So immediately I slow down to the speed limit, which was 55, and I look over my shoulder and there's a state trooper staring right at me. And if I'd been pulled over, then I'm sure I would have been over the legal limit. It would have been bad. It got my attention. I really said, hey, you know what? I don't want to go down this route. I've seen what it did to my dad. And I've got other paths that I can go follow. And for about 10 years, I didn't drink. I didn't drink at all. It was kind of just one of those decisions that I made. And just to be clear, maybe I had one or two, but it wasn't like I was drinking significant amounts of alcohol.
Right.
And I got involved in running competitively, and I was a pretty decent runner. Not a great runner, but a pretty decent runner. My friend who got me involved with running had a cyclist, and so I started riding with him. And I said, well, if I'm doing those two things, I might as well go do some triathlons, right? So I did. I started, and it became very therapeutic for me as well. One of the first benefits that I saw from it, Matt, was stress reduction. I could go out and run or ride and forget about everything else. I mean, I could really get in that moment, and it was really valuable for me, almost more so than anything else, other than I also liked the way I felt, but I also got self-esteem out of that process as well.
Awesome.
Right?
Well, I was gonna ask, hey, it's funny because alcohol is some of my co-hosts and I who do other who come on from time to time, it's sort of a co-host of the show because you can't, I think HRV, measuring it on a regular basis pretty much ruins alcohol for anybody who really cares. Like, if you care about your score the next day, it's just like such cognitive dissonance to wake up and like, oh, here's the data to show you. As you kind of go, and I know where I'm stopping you a little bit in the middle of the story, and I wanted to continue, but one of the 4 steps which I loved is dream big.
Right.
And I wondered, when you look at this transitional period, as your life was transforming, I sort of want to, like, how did your beliefs change? How did your thinking change? Like, I just like, because it seemed like, as I was reading, such a big turning point in your life. Like you had that event that you kind of woke up, realized certain things could be better, and just kind of how your beliefs, how your thinking was changing as you went to somebody who may have considered health, but maybe on an average level to really being a world-class performer in many ways.
Well, that's kind of, I haven't, well, maybe I did the pull-up attempt. That was pretty cool. We could talk about that. But the belief side of it, in my 20s, the sports and athletics, and the other thing I should mention is that in high school, and I always sort of looked younger than my actual age as well, right? It was just something that came along with
that picture of you at 20, I would have guessed 13. Like, I was like, whoa, I'm glad I read the caption on that, because I had to say, I was like, wow, he looks young, and you've continued to hold that youth.
Thank you. Well, part of the process for me was, I said to myself, one of these days, because looking younger, those years aren't really all that beneficial in social situations and work situations. It played against me. I'm sounding a little victim-like there, and that's not the message that I want to send. It was let me put it this way. It was the way I was thinking, but that thinking was definitely flawed.
Yeah.
But what did help me, what was driving me, and I think you're getting at, is this idea. And what I said to myself was, one day, if I take care of myself, this is going to pay off. My time's going to come.
Yeah.
Right. And I did. I had that belief. I didn't know how. I didn't know, exactly how this was going to manifest. That picture of me in my 20s, and I put a side-by-side up on Facebook group, and someone asked me the question. He said, what would that guy in his 21 say if you asked him how he could have, if he knew what was going to happen at 60?
Yeah.
And my answer was, I think that guy would say he wasted a lot of his 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
Right. I really did. And so I didn't date a lot. I tell the story about how I did get married in my mid 30s. I got divorced. There was, again, that voice that came back to me, and I don't know why, but it just kept telling me that you got more growing to do. And that growth was going to happen outside of this relationship. So, I agonized over this for months and months. I mean, in a way, this was the first person I'd had a relationship with, and now I'm going to, walk away from her. But I ended up saying, you know what, I think this is the right path for me. Her reaction was, hey, you want to get divorced? That's fine too.
Which is, maybe a little bit on the ego side, but probably a lot of your stuff a whole heck of a lot easier.
I have to acknowledge that I was, probably sort of selfish in the relationship, and I can understand her perspective a lot better. But here's right. Well, what happened during that divorce process was, I'm packing my stuff up. We flipped a coin as to who was going to get the condo, and she did. And that was part of it as well. I had to be free, right? Yeah. Because if I ended up staying in that condo, I wouldn't have done the things that I did, like sell all my stuff and move to Hawaii.
Right.
Right. And so the universe was really tipping the scale, I think, on all of this. But I found pictures of me in my 20s, and the epiphany was, holy cow, holy cow, all of that stuff was clearly in my head. I'm not a bad, I wasn't an unlikable, unattractive, unlovable guy,
Mhm.
right? And that was a big epiphany for me to realize that this was really all in my head. And this was about 5, 7 years ago. And of course, changing the relationship situation opened me up to a whole bunch of new experiences. I took some self-improvement classes, got out there and dated and met my current girlfriend. She introduced me to some really wonderful spirituality, which is actually how I got introduced to HRV in the first place,
Oh,
which
through
was
spirituality. Well,
through the heart. Have you ever heard of the Heart Math Institute?
oh, absolutely. Yes,
Yeah, right.
absolutely.
So we were listening to this guy Greg Braden, and he
Yep.
talked about the mind heart connection, and that's how I first actually heard about HRV.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I did after the divorce end up selling my stuff, going to Hawaii for a few months. It didn't really solve my issues. I did get to experience sort of pre-retirement, which was a good thing. All of these things really are beneficial, right? The
Yeah.
universe was really conspiring, and this is a belief. The universe was conspiring for me to get the experiences and meet the people that I needed to meet.
Mhm.
And anyway, I ended up coming back to the U.S. And as my 60th birthday was approaching, I said I want to get some professional pictures made, and to be able to possibly share, right, the work that I've done.
Yeah.
And when I did see this one picture that's on the cover of the book, I'm like, okay, if not me, who, and not now, when, right? If I'm ever going to share this story, now's the time to do it, right?
Yeah,
and
it's
and
awesome.
so that's how I got to the point of saying I want to be able to share what I've done, share my experience to help influence people. I mean, my coaching target audience, men in their 50s, is who I think I have the most
Mhm.
impact with. But I just love when anyone says, "Hey, when I've heard your story, I'm eating better, I'm exercising more, right?
Yeah.
I'm lowering my stress, right? I'm paying attention, right? And I'm being intentional about how I live my life."
Yeah.
Because health in and of itself is, I mean, we could put all of our energy into being healthy and not actually live life, and that's
Yeah.
not the point either, right?
Yeah, I would love to ask a question because I know, I believe in Colorado, where I'm talking to, you won a bodybuilding contest, if I'm correct, if I'm remembering that.
So what I won in my early 50s was the bantamweight competition. So that in bodybuilding shows. So after I did triathlon, I was diagnosed with low bone density, another story, and that's how I actually got started into, well, both testosterone replacement as well as weightlifting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Germany for work, and one of my colleagues who was a bodybuilder, he said, "Hey, Greg, have you ever thought about being on stage?" And I'm like, I weigh 130 pounds. What are you talking about? You're right. I mean, and he's like, "No, no, no. I mean, you've got a nice physique, and I think with some work you could build, put a little muscle on you, and you do great." So I'm like, "Oh, well, okay." And so I did. I started, and I got a couple of coaches and trainers, and um, at 52 and 53, I think it was, I won the bantamweight. So it was 143 pounds and below division in the state show in Colorado for 2 years back to back. I'm still not beyond the idea of going back on stage as a 60-year-old competing in that weight class. I
Yeah.
mean, that's still a thought that I have in my mind. There are senior or master levels categories, but typically those are not weight divided. I'm like, hey, bring it on. If you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
I don't need that age
yeah, I was
handicap.
impressed. So I wonder if because what also I like about your approach too, and this is again, our audience, this won't be the first time they've heard me, is like utilizing like heart rate variability. I know the metrics that we both pay attention to is that measure of overall health. And I think, well, I know at least from my perspective, one of the challenges is a more holistic way to look at health, because I've met everywhere from, growing up as a basketball player, I imagine in what I know about the bodybuilding world, which is not a ton, but I've watched a few documentaries over the years that, is that you can look good, but not be healthy. That like,
Oh, sure.
that health is, I mean, I think sometimes our vision of health, that's what HRV doesn't lie to you, because you may look good, but be, not healthy in other ways. And so I wonder, as you have triathlons, bodybuilding, really an exemplar, now a coach to help people. And I just see this more. I've had 3 books in a row on my library list on how you age in a healthy way. And you can't separate the mental, the psychological from the physical. It all, like that separation of mind and body, really hasn't ever existed, just how we think about it.
Right.
So I wonder, like, as you look at, all the things in your book is, again, kind of a book, at least titled with having a great abs and the 6-pack that you, or 8-pack or what, a 12-pack or whatever it is I'm looking at on that cover, recharge often, live well, own your health, dream big. It's not like you're doing there's not one of your 4 steps is do planks for 20 minutes every day. Like, so I wonder how you look at this from, obviously you've got the physical part manifested in a way that you're a role model. How do you look at that holistic approach to living and aging, the way you coach people to do that and be healthy?
Thanks for asking. The number one thing that I want to convey is that we don't have to age the way society tells us that we should age, right?
Yeah.
None of us can do anything about the number of years that we've been here spinning around the sun. That's just, that time marches on. What we do have a lot of control over, total control over, is what we do with our time, right? And how much of that time we want to, and energy that we want to invest in our future self.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned the dream big step in the book earlier, and I start that step off actually with a chapter on beliefs, because I am a big believer that everything in life starts from our beliefs.
Yeah.
And when do those beliefs start? They start when we're children, from our parents. And I quote Bruce Lipton, who says, his quote is, if you want to understand how your beliefs have affected you, look at your life.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And the interesting thing is, maybe not. So you can look at what you are, but what are you not?
Right. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Because what you're not is so much driven by your beliefs, just as much as what you are. Because if I'm not even willing to try, I've lost before I even started.
Yeah.
And that's, and it goes back to belief. And I lived it, right? I mean, like I said, I wasted a lot of my 20s and 30s by not really having confidence in myself, both in social and as well as professional situations. I mean, my career is fine, but a lot of people, I mean, I was very fortunate in the sense that I went to Indiana to do an MBA in 1989. Okay. Well, and my MBA was in information technology. Well, that was a good choice.
That was a very good choice.
Right. Now, I ended up going to work for a car company. It would have been a little different if I'd come out to California and hopped in with Oracle or one of the fledgling tech companies, right? But nevertheless, it was a good choice. But the whole point of Dream Big is a couple of things. One is, let's not be limited by our limiting beliefs. And there's ways we can identify those and change them.
Mhm.
And then let's think about, how do we want to live our life, right? What is it that we really want to accomplish? And then finally, what are our goals, our health goals that we need or want in order to support what we want it to?
Yeah.
So those are really the package of ideas. And I also talk about, what do I want to be when I'm 80, for example? So it's 20 years from now, right? And my thinking here has evolved, and one of the stretch goals that I have, and I lived in Colorado for 20 years before moving
Yep.
out here to Phoenix, and I did it, not all of it, I did about 19, I think, of the 14 footers over the
Nice.
last 3 or 4 years after I
Love
came
it.
back from Hawaii, and I said, why not climb Kilimanjaro, summit Kilimanjaro, one of I think it's
Yeah.
the big 7 peaks on the planet, at 80, and as an interim goal is in the next 5-year increments, I need to be climbing, one of these high peaks in Colorado or wherever. It doesn't have to be there, right? Every 5 years, right? The message here is, live your life. Don't wait. We don't know. And, in Live Well, my very first chapter, and it's kind of, and I make this comment because Dream Big is all about, what do I want to be and how am I going to do it? But the very first chapter in Live Well is, be present and happy,
Yeah.
right? So set a destination, but enjoy the process, because the process might be the whole point,
I love it.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I also want to talk about the recharge often, because
Okay.
in the HRV arena, I think the thing that heart rate variability has done for athletes, and part of my mission is, even if you're not, even if you're a corporate athlete, or you just want to bring your best to life,
Sure.
what the athletes have used HRV to really transform sport, probably from when we were both growing up. I'm sure Alabama wasn't that much different than Indiana with sports craziness, just maybe
Exactly.
a different shaped ball.
Sure.
But that push yourself into the brink, and then get up as early as possible the next day and do it all over again. And now you look at somebody like LeBron James, who, as of this recording, is doing, whether you like him or not, doing amazing things,
Oh
and
yeah.
a very advanced age for a basketball player.
For a
I mean,
professional
Tom
athlete,
Brady,
right?
Brady just retired, but I don't think we would look necessarily at Brady as a elite athlete. I think it was elite quarterback, but
Yeah.
but I also would throw the ball down immediately if I saw a 350-pound person trying coming at me too. So there's no judgment there, Tom. But you look at that, and I think what these elite athletes have been trailblazers for us is, and I like to say, thinking about recovery as a verb. Like, okay, what am I going to do? And think about recovery as part of my performance. And I would love to just kind of get your thoughts. I mean, you outlined this in your book around, meditation, prayer, sleep, but just kind of how you look at that as, continuing to be a high level physical role model at your age. How do you look at recovery, especially as you're in your 60s, still pushing the envelope, because your goals are like, even your 80 goals are like, boy, can I do those? I'm not really sure. I would like to say I could do some of them, but so how do you look at that recharge recovery piece in your own life?
Well, I started taking sleep much more seriously about 3 or 4 years ago. It wasn't one of the first things that I really embraced, and as you know, I've been wearing an Aura ring for quite the last year. And one of the features that I didn't really realize I was going to get out of the Aura ring was the HRV
Yeah,
data,
yeah,
and I've been really kind of fascinated by this. Well, let's talk about that for just a second, right?
great.
So,
Yeah,
um, when I first got the ring, and I was initially looking at my HRV data, and I'm 60, and my average HRV overnight was around 60, which is pretty decent, I think.
yeah, Let's call
right?
that good. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. And what I even noticed on top of that, and so I started doing some what I call structured breathing. It's a meditation technique, and I would use the ring. And the meditation technique is really simple. I would just breathe in, hold like that for say a total of about 6 to 8 seconds, and then breathe out through my mouth. Again, about 6 to 8 seconds. So in, hold, out, hold. My HRV shot through the roof.
Yep.
I could get HRV, on a 15-minute average in the 80 or 90 or even 100
Yeah.
range. So, it was really fascinating to me, right, to
Yeah.
see that sort of reaction. Now, more recently, I have, for a couple of conditions, taken on a couple of medications. And those medications have whacked my HRV. It's frustrating and incredible. And I mentioned this. I had a call with my doctor on Monday of this week, and he said, "Why don't we do this? Why don't we take you off of one of those meds, and let's see what happens for a few weeks,
Yeah.
right? And let's see what the trade-off is here." And sure enough, as I've gone off of one of these medications, my HRV is trended back up. So I was on this medication, I was like in the mid 30s, and I'm like, I'm just like, this is aggravating, right? And so yeah, I've seen a trend up this week in terms of my HRV recovering back to where I was. I do also pay attention to, and of course the aura is pretty strict about, hey, you're not getting enough recovery time.
Yeah.
I've been always really pretty consistent with taking a day a week off from exercise, and I can see and sometimes I will. I'm really pushing hard, and maybe in my schedule, I've got this German calendar in me.
Yeah.
And thanks, Mom. And it's like, wait a second, I need a day off tomorrow. I've just been pushing it too hard. I need to listen to my body, to the data, and just respect that. So I think all of this recharge often is really about bringing energy back into our systems.
Yeah.
And whether it's prayer, meditation, and of course from a spirituality perspective, it doesn't. I'm not dictating a spiritual path for folks. I'm encouraging people to consider it. And I talk a little bit about my process, right, that I went through in the book. And it's been valuable to me just to be able to have experiences and interactions with other people, and actually to reconcile some of my grievances with religion.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and so a couple things you said. I love the example of using heart rate variability. We talk a lot about it on the show, and I've shared a lot of my own stories about like the N of one. So
Sure.
you can look at population norms. They give you a reference point. It means that 60 is pretty good for someone your age. So you could feel good about that. But, you still want to improve it, right? Is what you're doing. And then seeing that, okay, in the study of Greg adds a new variable to his life, a medication, which does something to heart rate variability, which probably is saying something, and then getting off that under doctor's supervision, everybody please hear, that you can sort of measure, okay, what happens when I'm going to maybe stay on one, take one off, what do you see improvement there, and really getting that data and feedback. And I know as I progress my late 40s now, like things change, and it's like, okay, what does now that I live, in Colorado and can go hike, do I need to run? Like, what is jogging versus hiking? Basically walking in the mountains. Well, what's that different? To test those things out, to kind of find through the stages of your life as your body shifts, kind of what keeps you at that at a healthy level. And I love that example of using, I always advocate for HRV to be a new vital sign. And boy, did you like that's one of the best examples I've ever heard of that usage.
Yeah, and you know, I had a great triathlon year when I turned 50 10 years ago. I did do some triathlons this last year. I didn't have the same results. I mean, it's just, I'd love to be able to tell you that I beat my times from when I was 50, and I didn't. I didn't even come close, actually. And several reasons for that. I didn't train. I almost didn't train at all in that way. But here's an important point. I'm playing the long game now,
Yeah.
and I'm intentionally doing things that will contribute to my long-term health, even if it means a certain short-term trade-off. And let me
Yeah.
give you the example. So this last year, when I was training to do triathlons, I didn't stop lifting weights. I want to maintain the bone health, and that was an issue that I had earlier, as
Yeah.
well as my muscle mass.
Yeah.
I know I could have been a better triathlete had I taken those hours of weight training and put them on the bike or,
Right.
ran, swim. But I consciously am not doing that because what difference? I mean, whether I'm a minute or two faster or slower in the race, even if it means I don't end up on a podium, I don't really care about that, right?
Yeah.
I want to be functional, and I want to be functional in my senior years. Why? Why? So I can hopefully encourage and inspire other people to do the
That's
same.
that's awesome. So I always finish up with authors on this question, and I'm
Okay.
really curious about your answer to it, because I find what I love about writing books is I learn things like things that like in my talks, my training, those sort of things play a small role, all of a sudden become more important. Like there's kind of epiphanies putting ideas, thoughts
Hmm.
on paper. And I just kind of wonder, as you went through the process with this book, was there anything that sort of any of those epiphanies or any insights, as you were thinking deeply about this for, I assume, several months at a time at least, like anything sort of come at you that may have not have been there as you stared at that first blank page?
Well, lots of things happen through the course of writing, for sure. And I haven't talked with too many other authors, so I'm not sure. And I know that there's no one right way to do this, right? It's just whatever process you use to put clay on the palette and start molding it. Is it an additive process, a subtractive process? I do know that a number of my thoughts came through meditation, right?
Awesome.
Where
Yeah.
I'd be meditating and the thought would come to me, and even the DOLR, that acronym, which I went through the process of trademarking for some reason, I guess, right, came to me, I think, as a part of a meditative process where I was really considering how do I want to package it and present this in a way that's easy to understand and consumable. That would be one thing. I also know it's a very iterative process, at least for me. We were
Yeah.
talking even before we started recording that I'm I'm going through, and every time I go through a revision, it gets better. It
Yeah.
does. And for me, for a book like this, it doesn't need to be perfect. I don't, need, and we can all quibble over certain sorts of puncture and grammar and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Passive
so,
voice. I learned I have this software that Grammarly, I'll give them credit because they taught me
okay.
how to, like, passive voice was my big thing. So
Oh, I see. Yeah,
yeah.
sure, sure. Um, and it's a different world. I mean, if people have the idea of writing a book, I would encourage them to do it. It's not that
Yep.
hard these days.
Right.
I hired for the cover of my book. I went to Fiverr,
Yeah.
and I gave him the photo that I wanted to use and the idea, the title of the book, and I probably have spent about $100
Yeah.
altogether, working with this gentleman in Pakistan,
That's
right? And I credit him in the acknowledgments of the book. Hey, if you're interested, go reach out to this particular gentleman on Fiverr.com. So it's really kind of cool that we're making this so easy to do, right? And bringing in people from, literally all over the world.
And it just expands. I mean, I imagine as a coach and a mentor, I mean, it just expands. You can do that now for people you haven't met. And plus, I would imagine an amazing manual to help with the people that you do coach too, because it's a real step-by-step of ways to, again, organize within these 4 steps, but very holistic. Like I said, that's what kind of hitting me is like, because sometimes you see, books like this and it's like, you got to do it my way. This is the one way you can do and get the results. And I really think that you give the reader so much to think about, that there's definitely different pathways to living a long, healthy, fulfilling.
I think I love that word. Thanks for bringing that up. I made a point in this book to have exercises at the end of each chapter, right? And at the end of each step, I suggest that the reader go back and consider the different observations that they made from each of the chapters, and to consolidate it down to, hey, here's the key takeaway for me in Dream Big. Here's what I want to accomplish and why. Own your health. We didn't even really talk about that, right? But there's folks out there that want to help us, but ultimately it's up to us, right? We own our health. And who's your medical team, right? And are they the right folks? And do they know what you're trying to accomplish? So I actually, out on my website, people can actually, if they just sign up, they can get a workbook for free that's got all of those steps. And
well, as we wrap up, give them that address. So,
okay, awesome, sure, it's absat60.com. So absat60.com is the website, and sure, feel free to go out there. I am featuring some folks as well. If people have others, stories that they would like to share, and I'm also got the opportunity to work with folks as well through the services that I'm offering. So by all means, please do take a look at that and reach out if you have any questions.
Spectacular. Well, we got the address out there. We'll put that in the show notes too, as well as a link, coming up with where to find the book. Obviously, the website, I'm sure we'll have all that too. But we'll throw that in the show notes that everybody can find it at optimalhrv.com. Greg, really enjoyed the book. Really enjoyed our conversation. Good luck with the book. I know it's always an exciting and nervous time when you're about ready to send it out to the world. It's funny. There's the, hey, I can change every word in this point, and then you hit publish, and then it's at least locked in for a little bit with that. So congratulations. I think it's a really, like I said, it's abs and so much more with this, and a great holistic approach to aging. It got me thinking a lot. I love the activities. So
I love to hear that, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun. And I always like to chat with Coloradans.
Awesome. And Hoosiers. We got a few things.
That's right.
We got a few things in common. So hey, maybe we'll have to meet up for a non-alcoholic beer when you come out to Colorado next time. So
let's do that. Or if we get down to Arizona.
Well, great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your time and your work.
Appreciate you too.